Chapter 1. Isabella walked into her apartment and grinned as her dog 𝘂𝘴𝘢 barked excitedly, doing spins in front of her. "Hello, boy." She scooped him up in her arms and accepted his happy licks of welcome. She laughed at the zealous intensity of his attentions. No matter what the rest of her day had brought, coming home to 𝘂𝘴𝘢 was always the highlight of her day. Some days she needed him more than others, but today had been a decent day, and he sensed she was calm and ready to just have fun with him. She grabbed his leash off the hook by the door and helped him into his harness while he danced excitedly. Had anyone told her having a dachshund as an emotional support dog was possible, she would have thought them crazy, yet she and 𝘂𝘂𝘢 were inseparable. He was her best friend. Her cell phone rang just as she was walking out the door, and after checking the call display, she put the phone to her ear as she stepped back out the brownstone home she owned in Queens, New York. "Hey, big brother, what's up?" Isabella let 𝘂𝘂𝘢 sniff around the tree on the sidewalk and shivered against the cool fall air.
"Just making sure you got home okay,"
𝘊𝘢𝘮 quickly spoke. Ever since her kidnapping when she was 19, her family had remained a tad overprotective. Usually, though, her brother 𝘊𝘢𝘮, married to her boss and knew all of their secrets, was a bit more relaxed. She wondered what he really wanted. "Which kid is crying in the background?"
"Callie,"
he groaned.
"How can an 18-month-old be so damn defiant?"
"Have you met her mother?" Isabella chuckled. 𝘊𝘢𝘮's wife was not only her boss, she was her mentor, her savior, and one of the most ruthless women she'd ever met. She loved her, but she feared her too. Clara's daughter Callie was proving to be a handful, rivaling her mother's tense nature. "So, what do you want?"
"Just wanted to know you got home okay."
𝘊𝘢𝘮 was one of the few people in the world who knew she was more than an actuary, so his concern was odd. "I'm fine. Just out walking 𝘂𝘂𝘢."
"He's not a real dog, you know,"
𝘊𝘢𝘮 teased. "I will let him loose on your face if you insult my dog again," she quipped dryly. "He will eat your face." Her brother laughed in her ear and she rolled her eyes again. "Tell me why you are checking in to make sure I got home okay. I haven't been in the field in 2 weeks, and my work at Draxton is literally to sort out financial risk. It's the epitome of dry. If you looked up the least risky job in the world, actuary is it."
"We had dinner last night with the Andropovs,"
he spoke quietly.
"Just wondering if you knew Yevgeny was back in town."
"Why would I?" She grimaced as she allowed 𝘂𝘂𝘢 to take the lead and walk them down the street.
"Because you dated for 3 years and then suddenly you weren't dating, but Clara says you two still talk once in a while."
He was trying to be a good big brother. She gave a mirthless laugh. "Yevgeny Andropov is currently dating a leggy blonde, blue-eyed influencer who spends more time in exotic locations taking bikini photos and body shots. Trust me, I have no need to know his whereabouts."
"So you're not friends with benefits?"
"Ew, 𝘊𝘢𝘮, I'm not discussing my sex life with my older brother." She shuddered at the notion. "I'd sooner talk to Mum."
"I can call her,"
he offered with a low chuckle. She heard the relief in his voice and shook her head. "𝘊𝘢𝘮, I'm fine. Yevgeny and I ended things on an amicable note, and I'm happy for him." The truth was, they had hooked up twice since they had split, and she regretted it deeply. Her eldest brother did not need to know this information. He also didn't need to know she sometimes missed the fun she'd had with the Russian, but not enough to cry over. He had been her first lover, but not her last, and she was okay with it. She saw 𝘂𝘂𝘢 was ready to turn back after only 5 minutes of walking and shook her head. Lazy dog didn't like the cold, and it wouldn't be long before she'd be fighting him to walk in the winter snow. "Is there anything else you need, or can I hang up now?"
"Oh,
He paused.
Yeah, I guess Clara wants you for a minute. Hold on."
Isabella rolled her eyes as he fumbled with his phone. How someone as composed as Clara put up with someone as technologically challenged as her brother was unknown to her. "Isabella." Clara's voice was crisp on the line. "You left the office late today." "Checking my comings and goings, boss?" She walked slowly back to her front door. "I only know because I saw you leaving just ahead of me." Clara's chuckle made her smile. Ah, I was busted. She laughed. I had a report I wanted to make sure was on Calvin's desk when he got in tomorrow morning. He had asked for a statistical risk analysis on the prototype project. I told him to give you until Friday to get it in. Clara said seriously. He's working you too hard. She laughed. He did give me until Friday, but the data was cut and dry. I also know he'll be questioning 30 things in the report, so if I have to redo something, it's better to do it early so I can finalize it for him before your meeting Friday. Alien said he was worried you were working too hard to avoid 𝘍𝘳𝘪𝘁. Clara was blunt. This was why she loved her sister-in-law. There was no beating around the bush, no pretenses. She was who she was, and she made no excuses for it. No, I'm not avoiding him. Didn't know he was in town, didn't need to know. He has a girlfriend. I'm keeping my distance. She stepped up to the stairs and unlocked the door. Yeah, I met her last night. She's a spoiled, bratty socialite who needs to be knocked down a peg or two. Her father has done her no favors with her. Isabella rolled her eyes. Well, I didn't think she came from a middle-class family, given her last social media photo was her on a yacht in the middle of the Mediterranean. You follow her on social media? Clara asked incredulously. Not purposefully. She followed me, and at first I didn't realize who it was. Stupidly, I followed her back. Then when I realized who she was, it was too late to unfollow her, otherwise I'd look like I cared. I have enough insanity in my life without adding my ex's crazy new girlfriend to it, yet here we are. You should come for dinner, Clara said suddenly. Nope. She refused immediately. I had Callie in the background, and I know you will use me as a distraction so you two can go hook up somewhere in your glass castle. Not happening. Amelia is supposed to come over, and we're supposed to watch the hockey game. You could bring her here, Clara begged. No. Isabella shook her head as she bent down and removed Casper's harness and lead. I'm home for the night. I'm not going out unless I have a damn good reason to go out, and watching my niece and nephew explore the terrible twos is not it. Fine, I can't say I blame you. This kid is out of control. She griped. My grandfather was here all day today and indulged her every whim and then left when she was overstimulated and exhausted. Sounds like a you problem. Isabella chuckled. I love you, Clara, and I love those little demons, but I love them when they are happy and in good moods and want to play horsey on the big doggies. A knock on her door had her looking over her shoulder as her sister popped through the door. Amelia is here. I need to go. She quickly said bye and threw her phone on the hall table. Clara and Alien begging me to go over. Amelia pulled a face. Edward is turning those kids into heathens. I told Clara she needs to put them in daycare with other kids their own age. Amelia bent down and scooped Casper up. Now this little guy is perfect! She giggled as he accepted his hello kiss. He's the perfect man and roommate. He eats whatever I make him, he never talks back, and he holds me when I'm sad. Isabella grinned as she reached out and rubbed his ears. How was work today? Deliver any babies? Her sister was a midwife, and it had taken her many years to decide what she'd wanted to do with her life, but she'd found her calling and was thriving. Amelia shook her head, her dark curls framing her face. No, I have 3 ladies ready to go at any time. She shook her phone in her hand. So I'm on call, but for now, I'm all yours. They went to the kitchen and Isabella pulled 2 beers out of the fridge and passed her sister one. I ordered pizza on my way home. It should be here soon. Pepperoni? Yes, thin crust and not from Alien's new pizza joint. Who the hell puts truffles on a pizza? How he can even say he's a New Yorker is beyond me. Amelia shuddered. I stopped in on the weekend and the special had artichoke hearts on it. Nasty. Yet the place is packed. People are loving it. He's making a killing. Isabella shook her head in disbelief. Did you hear he has a television producer chasing him and Raoul to do a cooking competition? Clara vetoed it immediately. Isabella laughed as she plunked down on the sofa and grabbed the remote to turn the game on. She said they have enough press without him actually appearing on TV. She rolled her eyes as she heard her phone ringing in the hall. If it's Clara asking me again to babysit, I'll lose my mind. She walked back to the hall and grabbed her phone, immediately recognizing the number. She hit decline. She tossed the phone on the coffee table and flopped down beside her sister, who was scrolling through her phone. Not answering it? Nope. Yevgeny? Yep. Why does he always call me when he gets serious with a girl? We broke up almost 3 years ago. I am not some sounding board to work through whether or not he's making a good decision. He was your first. But I wasn't his. Isabella snapped back. So he shouldn't be so damn concerned about my thoughts. He thinks because he had my virginity, part of me will always belong to him. It's annoying. I can't decide if he's trying to rub it in he's moved on, checking to see if I'd take him back or be his side piece. Would you? No. She shook her head. He's smart and funny, but he's also self-centered and more concerned with likes and follows than being a normal, decent human being. It still bugs you, doesn't it? Amelia asked quietly. Yes, she admitted as she stood to answer the doorbell, glancing at her phone, noting the notification her pizza had arrived and had been deposited on her doorstep. He would have kept walking and let those thugs hurt that girl in the alley. Good thing Clara taught you self-defense and you saved her, Amelia agreed. I just don't have any use for minding my own business when someone is being hurt. The only reason his bodyguard helped me was because he was worried it would get back to his father if he let me defend a girl without help. She grimaced as her phone started ringing again. Hit decline on my phone, will you? I can't be bothered tonight. Tonight, I am hanging with my sister, my dog, watching the game, drinking beer, and eating pizza. She left to collect the pizza and made her way back to the living room. Her sister was making a face. Does he always send you explicit messages? They must be fighting. Isabella reached out and turned her phone off. The only time he does shit like this is when he's fighting with a girl. He thinks you'll go back to him because he thinks he has a big dong? Amelia laughed as she considered the message he'd just sent her younger sister. He doesn't know we have all seen the photos, does he? Isabella flipped open the pizza box and grinned. The worst part is, I believed him when he told me he was huge. What did I know? He was my first. Imagine my surprise when I hooked up with the fella from the nightclub and found out what 8 inches really was. Amelia chortled with laughter as she grabbed a slice and lifted it to her lips. Imagine being so rich and spoiled nobody has the guts to tell you your dick is small and you're a one-pump chump. What could be worse? Being the girlfriend of someone like him and being so concerned about his exes you follow them on social media like a creepy bitch. She took a bite of her pizza and groaned. This, she lifted the slice in the air, is way better than sex. You're doing it wrong if you believe that. Amelia grinned at her. But since you're still trying to find your groove, I'll let you keep the thought. They clinked their beer bottles together as they both giggled and settled into the sofa with the dog between them. Isabella tried to push the thoughts of her ex-boyfriend and his current girlfriend out of her head. She had no desire to be embroiled in his antics and caught in the middle of his relationship. Later, though, when she was in bed by herself, her sister gone home, and she was pouting over her favorite hockey team's loss, she stared at the ceiling while 𝘂𝘴𝘢 snored beside her. She let her mind drift back to the night she knew she couldn't be with Yevgeny any longer. They had been walking to his car a few blocks from the dance club when they'd heard the girl's screams of terror coming from the alley. Instantly, Isabella had walked toward it, but he'd pulled her back, telling her to mind her own business. She had shoved him so hard he'd fallen on his ass, and he'd run full tilt into the alley and had beaten up 2 guys who were trying to assault the woman. Had Yevgeny's bodyguard not followed her, a 3rd guy lurking in the shadows could have hurt her badly. Yevgeny had simply walked to the car and waited for her to come back. She hadn't gone back. She'd stayed with the girl until the police officers arrived and then sat with her while she was examined by the nurses at the hospital. Eventually, Clara had come to sit with them both, lending support the best way Clara knew how. In the morning, when she'd known Yevgeny would be at his workplace, she went to his apartment, took all her belongings, and left the spare key on his counter. She had known he was not the right man for her following those events. And other than 2 times in the last 3 years, she had been able to maintain her decision to not be involved with him. She hadn't heard from him in almost 6 months now. Rumor was his father was part of the Russian mob. Yevgeny had once joked with her she'd never be able to leave him, Once you were in, you could never get out. Now as she lay in the quiet of her bedroom, she remembered his words and groaned. Short of killing him, she didn't know how to get rid of him. She rolled onto her side and wrapped her arms around 𝘖𝘴𝘢, who sighed contentedly with the action. She kissed his furry head and smiled. Who needed a man when a girl had a perfectly acceptable dog to cuddle? Chapter 2. Isabella knew she was turning heads as she exited the subway into the early morning foot congestion in Manhattan. She wasn't vain. She simply knew she was a tall, confident brunette, impeccably dressed, and the few whistles she'd heard during her short walk confirmed it. She was almost 5 feet 9 inches in height barefoot, and the last almost 7 years of working with Clara, training and fighting, made her lean and lithe. Her body was toned and tight, and her strong calves were encased in a pair of knee-high, high-heeled leather boots, adding 2 inches to her already statuesque frame. Her hair was a thick chestnut brown she had wound into a thick braid over her shoulder. She had big dark glasses perched on her straight nose, and a tan newsboy cap, the same shade as her long trench coat, was nestled perfectly atop her head. Her coat was open because it had been hot on the subway, and a thick scarf of burnt orange hung loosely around her neck and over her chest. Her plaid skirt went to her knee and not a hair longer. Professional, yet still youthful, and she had paired it with a black, well-fitted turtleneck. Catcalls from ignorant men came more often than she liked. She walked the 3 blocks from the subway station to Draxton, the company owned by her sister-in-law. She had interned for Clara while in college, and she had liked it so much she had jumped at the opportunity when the CFO Calvin had asked her to stay on as his actuary. She paid no attention to the limo outside of the offices. Draxton was an international technology and security company, and there was no shortage of rich people who found their way to the offices. As she stepped through the glass doors into the lobby, she saw Ben, Clara's head of security, shaking his head at her. Before she could follow his gaze, a tap on her shoulder made her jump. She spun around and found 𝘣𝘳𝘪 standing behind her. 𝘣𝘳𝘪 was a gorgeous specimen of a man, and even though he had turned 30 this year, he was becoming more attractive. He had grown into his nose she had once thought might be too big, and his wide lips were full and plush. His eyes were a deep blue, an indigo shade enhanced by the slicked-back black hair still thick and luxurious. He was at least a half-foot taller than she was, and he was dressed in a dark suit perfectly tailored to his body. 𝘣𝘳𝘪. She pushed back the instant physical reaction she had to him. What are you doing here?
You ignored my messages last night.
He glared at her.
Why? I wanted to talk.
He looked her up and down.
Also, you look amazing.
Talk? So why send me a dick pic? She grimaced. By the way, my sister had my phone when you sent your photo. He smirked, not embarrassed at all.
Did she like what she saw?
She patted his chest and shook her head. Here's a tip for you, Evie. Nobody, not a woman alive, likes receiving a dick pic unsolicited. It's not attractive. It's like getting a picture of a blobfish.
What's a blobfish?
His accent was pronounced as he grimaced at her. Google it. She shook her head. What do you want? I need to get to work.
Dinner. Have dinner with me.
He reached for her fingers and played with them.
I miss you.
Nope. She managed to tug one hand away from him and pulled her sunglasses off to meet his eyes angrily. I told you before, I'm not interested in you, and the last time was a mistake. I'm not repeating it. Where is Portia?
Who is Portia?
He pretended not to understand her question. Evie, I don't have time for this. I need to get to my desk. I know you were with her 2 nights ago. I don't know what happened between then and now, and I really don't care.
I saw your brother and sister-in-law and realized how much I miss you.
He shrugged like the answer was logical.
I ended things with Portia because I want to be with you. We should never have broken up.
You're an idiot. She considered smacking him to knock sense into him. We, she clarified, didn't break up. I left because I realized as much as I like you, we have vastly different moral compasses, and I'm not interested in being with someone who thinks of himself before anyone else.
I have learned my lesson,
he argued, tugging her fingers and pulling her towards him.
Have dinner with me.
No. I said no. I meant it. Call your girlfriend, get back together with her, and take her somewhere warm and exotic.
Why warm and exotic?
He asked curiously. Because it would mean you are far, far away from me. She turned away and called to the security guard who was watching her protectively. Ben, can you escort Mr. Andropov off the premises, please?
Dinner,
Yevgeny called out as she walked away.
I will pick you up at 6.
No! She shook her head and repeated herself as she flashed her pass card over the elevator and pushed the button to call it back to the lobby. Go away! She heard Ben telling him to leave or he'd pick him up and toss him out the door.
Isabella, dinner, please. Just dinner. We can talk.
She turned and faced him. Leave now or I'm going to send the picture you sent me last night to your mother. She saw Clara entering the building behind him and saw her eyebrows lift in surprise at her words. Clara barely came up to his chest, but she whispered something to him to make the taller man grow pale and then turn on his heel and leave abruptly. She came to stand beside Isabella just as the elevator doors opened.
What was that all about?
They stepped into the elevator. He saw you and Ilian the other night and realized how much he misses me, so he broke up with Portia. She laughed slowly, which really means she got mad his ex-girlfriend's family is very friendly with his family, and she told him off and he's throwing a temper tantrum. Dare I ask what photo you're threatening to send to his mother? Sent me an unsolicited picture of his penis. She grimaced. Amelia had my phone in her hand, so she's the one to see it. I had her delete it. She laughed at the memory. Why do guys think we need to see a close-up? Or better question, what makes them think it will make us run screaming towards it? It's damn ugly. She looked at her sister-in-law. What did you say to him to make him run? I told him if he didn't leave peacefully, I'd hack his browser history and send it to his mother, which is likely far more embarrassing than whatever picture he sent you. Clara was getting off the floor where the innovation lab was. Coming? Owen messaged me this morning to say he got the last kink out of the car. Seriously? Isabella gasped excitedly and followed her out. This would be impressive technology to put on the chopper. Imagine. Clara grinned, her excitement echoing Isabella's. It had been almost 10 years since Erwin had been working on her invisible car. Every time they thought they got it perfect, something else popped up. I've been waiting so long. How were the kids this morning? We decided Amelia is right and it's time for them to socialize with kids their own ages they aren't related to. She rubbed her chest self-consciously. I swear I feel like I'm throwing them to the wolves, but they're turning into spoiled brats, and between my grandfather and Ilian, I'm at my wit's end. They'll be fine, Isabella reassured her. Edward must be pissed. There's my other problem. He's been so distracted with them, he's been out of my hair here at the office. The minute I put them in school, he'll be here bugging the hell out of me. She grinned. I'll need the invisible car to hide from him. For the next hour and a half, Isabella and Clara explored some of the new technological advances, and Isabella admitted some of the technology was way over her head. She was great with numbers, but science wasn't her thing. She could run numbers and stats all day, every day, and she appreciated the technology which helped make it easier. But the science behind programming, the biology, physics, and chemistry this lab utilized often had her awestruck. As she made her way back to her desk, she was still shaking her head at some of the things Clara and Erwin had shown her this morning.
How was innovation?
Calvin asked as she hung up her coat. Every time I step in the lab, I'm blown away. Geniuses. She sat at her desk and turned her computer on.
Yes, but it also freaks me out.
Calvin leaned against her desk as he stared down at her.
I'm getting old, and some of those things boggle the mind.
She gave a laugh at his words. Did you find the report I left you yesterday?
Yes, and it was perfect. I've already sent it up.
They went over some of the other assignments needed for the week, and then she got to work. At noon, she looked up when one of the girls from HR, Lisa, poked her head into the room. "Lunch?" "Yes, please." Isabella stood up and grabbed her coat. "Cafeteria or deli?" "Definitely the deli," Lisa said with a grin. "They hired the new guy, and I like how he works the meat slicer." Isabella chuckled, and Isabella pulled her cell phone out and looked at it for the first time since she'd arrived to work. 13 text messages from 𝘍𝑰𝑗𝑐, 2 from a number she didn't recognize, and 1 missed phone call from another unknown number. "Emergency?" Lisa asked curiously. "No, ex-boyfriend." She rolled her eyes and then read the 2 text messages from the number she didn't recognize. "And his crazy girlfriend. How the hell did she get my number?" She sighed deeply and closed her eyes against the frustration she was feeling. "Your ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend is texting you?" "Mm-hmm, telling me to stay away from her man." She wanted to scream and punch the wall. I swear he better get his bitch under control, or she and I will have words and he won't like it. Lisa hooked her arm through Isabella's. "Forget about them. Let's go have a nice lunch, and you can tell me all about why you think the Rangers losing last night in preseason is not foreshadowing for the season." She huffed. It was only a preseason game. They have a great team this year. They walked into the sunshine, and Isabella instantly regretted wearing her jacket. "New York autumn. Dress for winter in the morning and summer at lunch," she complained as she pulled her jacket off as they walked, noting Lisa did the same. They chatted, walking arm in arm towards their favorite deli, and much to their delight, the young man newly hired was working and they each ordered their sandwiches and a drink and found a corner table in the crowded restaurant. The 2 women giggled as they cast glances around the room and realized there was an uptick of female patrons, probably because of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed man cutting pastrami behind the counter. One of the girls sitting at the table behind them loudly whispered, "Work that slicer, baby," and it caused half the restaurant to erupt into giggles. Isabella was pulling pastrami out of her sandwich and lifting it into the air to drop it into her mouth when her eyes locked with a man in line waiting his turn to order. She wasn't a bashful woman, and when he stared at her, she stared back brazenly. She spent her life surrounded by strong, independent women, and not even a man dressed too elegantly for a deli was going to make her blush. She looked him up and down as he stared back, and she grinned unabashedly when the person behind him tapped him to tell him it was his turn. He turned away to give his order. "He's hot," Lisa whispered at her. "Those green eyes and sandy blonde hair? Delicious." "More money than brains," she whispered back. "Look at his shoes. Look at the suit and the way it fits his ass." "Yeah, but he's as old as my brothers. I don't have daddy issues." Isabella turned her attention back to her sandwich, but then looked again at the view on both sides of the counter. It was her lucky day for sure. "Doesn't hurt to look," Lisa quipped, "and I can pretend to have daddy issues for an afternoon." "Maybe 2 afternoons." Isabella cast another furtive glance in the man's direction. "Or 3. They both giggled. "Ooh, someone ordered ham!" A girl choked out behind them, and they all turned their heads again to watch the younger man lift the huge chunk of ham and throw it on the slicer. A collective moan rose in the deli as he started manually slicing the meat, his tight t-shirt revealing the flexion of his biceps with each pass of the blade. Isabella leaned back in her seat and sipped her soda directly from the can as Lisa finished her sandwich. The green-eyed man at the counter was staring at her again, and she winked, and he shook his head at her brazenness, but he didn't look away. She felt her phone buzz again, and she looked at it, and her lips pulled tight. "Idiot ex-boyfriend again?" Lisa asked curiously, seeing Isabella's face. "No, I need to get back to the office. Clara is looking for me." She frowned with a pout, her full bottom lip covering her top lip. "She has a special project she wants me to start right away." She stood up. "Don't get me wrong, I like special projects, but I was enjoying my lunch and a show." She blew a kiss at the man slicing the deli meat and then waited for Lisa to wrap the half of her sandwich. As she headed to the door, she was walking towards the exit at the same time as Mr. Green Eyes, as she had aptly named him. He motioned for her to walk ahead of her and held the door as she stepped past him into the sunshine. "Thanks." She groaned when her phone rang again. She paused and looked at the number. She dropped an F-bomb, making Lisa laugh outright. She hit decline and looked at the man who was still staring at her, obviously surprised by the curse. She was over him being nosy. "Dude, what the hell is your problem?" He shrugged, turned away, and walked in the opposite direction she needed to go. She stared at his departing back, aware he had 2 security agents flanking him as he walked away. "Rich men are weird," she commented to Lisa as they turned to walk back to the office. Chapter 3.
Daddy, she's crazy! I need you to deal with her.
Portia.
Camden Torres pinched the bridge of his nose as he tried with practiced discipline not to raise his voice at his only child.
Explain to me exactly how you want me to deal with her.
Get rid of her. Isn't that what you and your army buddies do?
She looked over her shoulder at her father's head of security, Gideon, with a raised eyebrow. He glared at her, not surprised when she didn't even flinch. He'd made grown men cry with this look, and his daughter had him wrapped so tightly around her finger he couldn't make her blink.
Portia, I run a security detail firm for high profile. I do not kill people for kicks.
But you kill people,
she argued.
No,
he lied.
I do not kill people. I protect people.
He could see Gideon's fists clench and unclench from where he stood. Even the most unflappable of his team was ready to throttle his only offspring.
What's the point of us having all this money if you can't give me what I want?
Gideon walked out of his office, and Camden was desperately wishing he could follow him.
We do not have all this money.
He finally spoke after several long seconds of trying to measure his words.
I am a very wealthy man because I work hard, and I've made some exceptional investments. It allows you to have a life of luxury, a trust fund you are blowing through, and top-notch education which you've made no attempt to finish. You're 19 years old. It's time for you to grow up. If you're not going to finish college, get a job. At your age, I had a job and goals. Be better.
I came to you for help.
She stomped her foot angrily. He cocked his eyebrow at the display of temper.
Portia, I love you, but I have back-to-back meetings starting in 5 minutes. Either go to school or go find a job.
I have a job,
she protested, folding her arms over her chest. He closed his eyes.
Taking photos in Thailand with the ladyboys is not a job.
It is when I get sponsors to do it.
She pursed her lips at him.
And do you have sponsors to do it?
He held her gaze until she looked away and looked out the window of his top-floor office in downtown Manhattan.
I didn't think so. If you want to do the social media thing and make millions off it like Kim and Kylie, go for it.
He cursed he knew the names of those 2 women because of his teenage daughter.
I'd be thrilled if you showed half of their entrepreneurial spirit. Until then, you're grounded from using the jet, your credit card will have a maximum allowable spending limit, and you're not to leave the country without my express permission.
Daddy!
She shrieked at him.
This is unfair.
Portia, you just came into my office and asked me to kill a romantic rival. I think you've clearly demonstrated you've been overindulged far too long.
Ugh!
She threw her arms up in anger.
Can you talk to her then?
What exactly am I supposed to say?
He rolled his eyes as his phone lit up, telling him his next appointment was entering the building.
Just tell her to back off and leave Ev alone. She's always calling him, and he keeps liking all her photos and chasing after her. I know he went to see her today.
And how do you know this?
I followed him,
she said with a toss of her blonde hair.
Oh my God.
He groaned.
You followed a boy.
He's a man. He's almost 30.
Wait, your new boyfriend is only 9 years younger than me.
He watched as for the first time since she'd flopped into the leather chair opposite his desk, she squirmed.
Does he know you're 19?
Yes.
She paused.
I told him it was almost my birthday.
So, you lied. You just had a birthday in May. We're only in October. What does a 30-year-old man want with a kid? He asked angrily. I hope his ex-girlfriend takes him back. I don't want him around you. He stared furiously. What's his last name? Ev? Evan, is it? Evan what?
Andropov. Евгений Andropov.
She spoke quietly, looking at her perfectly polished manicures much too closely. When the sound of a pin dropping could have been heard in the office, but still her father said nothing, she lifted her blue eyes curiously to look at her father. His green eyes were flashing like fresh-cut emeralds, and his face was set so stonily she wondered for a moment if he'd died and frozen in place.
Daddy?
She squeaked.
You're dating Evgeny Andropov, Mikhail's son.
Yes.
We had dinner with his family and friends 2 nights ago, and neither of you thought fit to tell me this.
It's all over social media.
She shrugged.
I thought you knew.
For how long?
6 months.
She whispered as he swore loudly and smashed his fist against his desk.
I might kill you both, he said suddenly and looked at her furiously. I might kill you both and be done with it.
You said you don't kill people,
she said suddenly, realizing for the first time in her life her father was truly furious with her.
Why don't you want me dating him?
He's too old for you. He's the son of an old friend and it will make things weird. And his father is a goddamn mobster.
He yelled the last of it, ignoring how she flinched at his raised voice.
You can hang out with mobsters, but I can't,
she asked incredulously, and then immediately wished she could take back her words at the cold rage emanating from her father's face blistered. He stood then and walked to the now closed office door and yanked it open.
Out! Get out, Portia, before I send you to England to stay with your mother for the next 10 years.
Just talk to her for me.
She got up from her chair and walked slowly.
Her name's Isabella Ruiz.
She punched her fingers on her phone and smiled at him as she patted his chest as she walked past him.
I just texted her number to your phone.
He slammed the door so hard he was certain they heard it on the first floor and then kicked it for good measure. 10 seconds after, Gideon stepped back into the office and Cam pointed at him.
Shut up. Just shut up. Did you know she was dating Mikhail's son?
At his surprised look, he grimaced.
How the fuck did we miss she's dating him?
He flung himself back into his seat.
I want everything on him. Everything. I want to know why a 30-year-old man is probably screwing my little girl.
He grabbed a paperweight off his desk and wailed it across the room and watched as it wedged into the wall. Gideon walked back out without saying another word, and his administrative assistant poked her head into the room.
Mr. Torres, Mr. Lewis is here to see you.
Her eyes went to the paperweight in the wall.
New art installment?
Funny, Giselle.
He met her gaze.
Show him in. Cam!
Lyle Lewis stepped into his office.
Good to see you. Who was the young hottie getting into the elevator? Afternoon, quickie. My daughter.
Cam held the man's gaze and watched as he swallowed nervously as he realized his faux pas.
I'm so sorry, Cam.
He stood still, aware the man in front of him was notorious for his bad temper.
Look, I'm sorry. I didn't know you even had a kid. Sit.
Cam motioned to the chair and waited for the man to sit down before he took his own seat.
Do you know why you're here? Not really. Mikhail Andropov asked me to come see you.
He shifted nervously.
I know it's never a good thing when Mikhail's sending me somewhere. Relax, it's not your head on a platter he wants.
Cam leaned in his chair and eyeballed the weasel sitting in the chair his daughter had just vacated. He didn't like this guy in the least, but Mikhail trusted him, so it said something.
Mikhail came to me and wants you overseas. I'm sending one of my guys with you. You up for travel? Yeah, whatever you and the boss need.
He quickly outlined what he wanted the man to do and was glad the man didn't even flinch. When he called for his employee, Dustin, to be brought to his office, he made the introductions and then motioned for the door.
Your flight to Cairo leaves in 2 hours. Don't screw this up or Andropov won't be the one you need to worry about. Yes, sir.
Dustin nodded and grabbed his go bag from where he dropped it on the floor in the outer office.
And Dustin, Cam called out. Be careful. You cover his ass. I want him. He pointed to Lyle. Back here alive and unharmed. If he screws this up, if he does anything to mess this up, you better make sure your hands are clean and not part of it. If he manages to piss off the wrong person, you get him out and get home. Got it? Got it, boss. He clapped the other man on the shoulder. Let's go, Mr. Accountant. He picked up his phone and called Mikhail. Your accountant now has security detail. He opened his bank account and waited for the money to be deposited as they ended the call with no further words. He leaned back and closed his eyes against the throbbing headache battering his brain. He didn't need to open them again to know Gideon had come back into the room. He knew the man's footsteps as if they were his own. They were closer than brothers, and he waited for the tongue-lashing his friend was likely about to give him over his kid. Instead, he opened one eye to look when he heard Gideon's laugh rumble through the office. What's so funny? He turned his chair to look at him. Your kid, he wheezed, wants us to off her boyfriend's ex. He held his ribs as he laughed, his raspy voice echoing in the quiet of the room. When did my kid become such an asshole? Cam rubbed his face in humiliation. She actually wanted me to threaten this girl. He held up his phone so his friend could see. If you won't hurt her, just talk to her. He read the last text aloud. Joke's on her. Gideon finally started to speak. Do you know who the ex is? What did you find out? Clara Draxton's sister-in-law. He grinned widely as Cam cursed explicitly. He passed him his own phone. It's better, man. She's the eye candy from the deli earlier today. Cam cursed again and rolled his eyes. Gideon read from the file their investigator sent him. She's 26 and works at Draxton as an actuary. She ran the New York Marathon last year with Clara and Edward and made pretty decent time. Tell me why Evgeny is dating my daughter instead of her. Even to him, it seemed the man had downgraded, and he loved his daughter more than anything in the world. Because she kicked Andropov to the curb. One night they were dancing in the clubs, and the next night she was gone. Nobody seems to know what really happened, other than they were a couple and then they weren't. And since then? He asked quietly. Nothing as far as anyone knows until this week. It seems your Porsche blew a gasket after having dinner the other night. He grinned at his boss and best friend's expression. Her security agent said she lost her mind over the fact Evgeny's family is so tight with Draxton. Evgeny called her a child and walked away. Today, Evgeny showed up at Ruiz's place of work and she had security toss him on his ass. If my memory serves me right, she was cursing at her phone when we left the deli. She probably was getting calls from both of them. Gideon made a face. I love you, and I love your kid, but she's a nightmare on legs. She makes me glad I've never procreated. I don't want her near Andropov. Seems like he agrees after the last couple of days. I want to keep it that way. Find me Ruiz's number and address. I want to make her an offer she can't refuse. As Gideon lifted an eyebrow at him, he shrugged. If she takes him back, then I don't need to worry about my daughter being hooked up with this guy. How do you make it happen? I appeal to the one thing all women love. He linked his fingers behind his head and flexed his elbows wide as he leaned back in his seat. Cold, hard cash.